At just 8 years old, Zora confided to her grandfather, "I'm going to find a real friend, someone who truly gets me." On New Terra Nova, where adults were consumed by terraforming and kids often overlooked, loneliness was as pervasive as the scheduled artificial rain. That pivotal day dawned at the colony's annual swap meet, a frenzied bazaar where settlers bartered everything imaginable. Zora and Old Mac were navigating the maze-like stalls when something tugged at her heart. The event filled the colony's vast hangar, usually echoing with cargo shuttles, transformed into a clamorous market, abuzz with alien dialects and scented with intergalactic cuisines. "Can we go there?" Zora pleaded, pointing towards a shadowy alcove where a willowy figure, cloaked in crimson, presided over a table overflowing with mechanical bits. The vendor's large head and gray skin marked him as a Nebulan, his crimson eyes seeming to glow within the dimness. "Those Nebulans are always overpriced," Mac muttered, but he followed her, his knee creaking softly with each step. The Nebulan was rearranging components as they approached. A small, battered robot sat on the counter, barely larger than a cat, its metallic body scarred, its blue optics blinking weakly. One limb dangled awkwardly, and its core emitted an erratic pulse. "What's wrong with that robot?" Zora asked, leaning in close for a better look. The Nebulan's lips curved slightly. "Ah, the little PTRV unit." He'd salvaged it from the Cygnus military zone, he said, prodding it with a long finger. "Damaged. Cognitive matrix corrupted. Beyond repair." Zora reached out and tentatively touched the robot's head. To her astonishment, the machine tilted its head slightly, responding to her touch. Its optics flickered momentarily brighter. "It moved!" she exclaimed. "It's still working." The Nebulan shrugged. "Barely. Core functions are intact, but the AI is degraded. Combat reflexes fire randomly useless." "Combat reflexes?" Old Mac questioned. "A military support unit, I believe. Now just junk." The Nebulan waved dismissively. 3 credits, and it's yours. Not worth the effort to scrap it." Zora reached into her pocket and pulled out her credit chip, her allowance for helping with the moisture collectors. "Grandfather, please?" She looked up at Old Mac, her eyes filled with hope. Old Mac examined the robot skeptically. "Honey, it's barely functioning. It might die tomorrow." "But what if it doesn't? It responded to me. I think it likes me." The Nebulan emitted a sound that might have been a chuckle. "PTRV units don't like anything, child. They're programmed for efficiency, not companionship." He held out a long hand. 3 credits, or it goes to the processor." Zora pressed her chip against the scanner without hesitation. "His name is Petty," she declared as the transaction completed. "Zora," her grandfather sighed. "You can't just name a robot that might not even—" "PTRV-873 designation transferred," the Nebulan interrupted, handing Zora a data chip. "All sales final. No warranty." As Zora carefully lifted the robot, she was surprised by its lightness. Its surface was cool, and she felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat. "Come on, Petty," she whispered. "Let's go home." The robot's optics flickered, and one of its limbs twitched slightly. "That's the best it can do," the Nebulan said, already turning to another customer. "It's your problem now." As they walked away, Old Mac placed a hand on Zora's shoulder. "Are you sure, Starshine? That was all your credits?" Zora nodded, cradling the robot. "He needs someone, and I think he chose me." It's a machine, Zora. It didn't choose anything. You don't know that, she said, with a child's unwavering certainty. Sometimes, broken things just need someone to believe in them. Old Mac couldn't argue with that. He'd seen enough. He'd seen broken things in his 70 years, and now and then, miraculously, they could mend themselves. Back in their habitat on the colony's edge, Zora made a special spot for Petey on her desk. Finding an old charging pad, she carefully placed the robot on it, praying it would work. A tiny green light bloomed on Petey's base. "He's charging!" she exclaimed, eyes shining. Old Mac peered through his spectacles. "Well, I'll be military-era power cell, I reckon. Those last decades, if untouched. That's good, Starshine. He might just stick around a while." He patted her head, then added, "Don't get too hopeful, though. That unit's past its prime." The next few days, Zora spent every moment she could with Petey. He remained mostly still, only occasionally twitching or rotating his sensors. Sometimes he would let out strings of beeps that sounded like clumsy words. She told him about school, her dream to pilot a ship, and how the other children thought she was strange because she liked old Earth stories instead of VR games. "They just don't get it, Petey," she said one night, sitting close with him on her bed. "They think the virtual world is everything, but there's a whole, real universe out there." Petey's sensors flickered, and he made a soft, worried sound. "I know you understand," she said, gently wiping dust from his carapace. "You've seen real places, haven't you? Maybe other planets. Maybe you even fought in battles." At the word battles, Petey's senses flared, and his damaged limb jerked violently. "Oh, did I say something wrong?" Zora asked, startled. The robot stilled, his lights dimming. "I'm sorry," she whispered, touching his head. "I won't talk about it if it hurts you." That night, as Zora slept, Petey's systems ran a deeper diagnostic. Slowly, the charging pad had begun to revitalize him, and fragments of memory started piecing themselves together. It wasn't enough to fully restore him, but enough to start the essential repair protocols. By morning, Zora found Petey sitting up by himself, sensors bright, watching her. "Grandfather!" she cried, running to where Old Mac was making breakfast. "Petey's awake! Really awake!" Old Mac followed her, staring at the little robot who turned his head as they entered. "Well, I'll be," Old Mac said softly. "That charging pad must have done the trick." A burst of electronic chirps and whirs escaped Petey. Then, shockingly, a stiff, artificial voice echoed, "Reboot sequence incomplete. PTR V873 awaiting directive." Zora gasped, clapping with excitement. "You're talking!" she exclaimed. "Vocal system strained, 30% operational," Petey responded. "Extensive repairs require maintenance droids." Old Mac's brow furrowed. "That's military tech, no doubt. Hear those protocols?" Zora, undeterred, knelt, meeting the robot's gaze. "You don't need orders anymore. You're not a soldier now. You're my friend." Petey's head tilted, as if struggling with the concept. "Friend. Unrecognized command. Clarify, Miss Yon." Zora glanced at her grandfather, a plea in her eyes. "I suspect," Old Mac mused, "your little pal is highly specialized. Military bots don't usually have friendship programming, but he can learn, right? Robots can adapt." He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Depends on the core programming. Some adapt, others are locked into their original directives." He leaned in towards Petey. Unit PTR V873, can you learn and adapt? Petty's lenses flickered, as if deep in thought. Adaptive core compromised, yet partially functional. Awaiting revised mission directives. Zora's voice rang with conviction. Your mission is to be my friend and discover this colony. Mission acknowledged, Petty declared after a pause, initiating friendship protocols. As the weeks passed, Petty evolved. His speech smoothed, although remaining distinctly robotic, and his damaged limb gained greater function. He shadowed Zora everywhere she was permitted, save for the colony school, where personal tech was strictly forbidden. This isn't right, Zora grumbled one evening, frustration evident. Ilara chopped synthetic protein, preparing their evening stew. As Zora argued, Jax Whitfield flaunts his custom calculator watch at school, and nobody bats an eye. With a sigh, Ilara said, a calculator watch hardly compares to your robot companion, Zora. Besides, we still don't know the full extent of what your Petty can actually do. Zora retorted, he's capable of being my friend, which is more than I can say for most kids at school. Petty, perched on the counter, observing the food prep, chimed in, friendship status, positive. Zora's well-being, priority. Ilara smiled softly. Well, at least his priorities are clear. Later, as Zora struggled with a tedious homework assignment on New Terra Nova's terraforming history, Petty surprised her, projecting a small, vibrant hologram from his optical sensor. Petty, you can project holograms? She gasped. Display functions partially restored, Petty explained, accessing archived data on terraforming technologies. The hologram revealed detailed schematics of atmospheric process and soil enrichment systems, far surpassing the information in her school books. This is incredible, Zora exclaimed. Where did you find this? Military database access, Petey replied. Data relating to terraforming of lunar operation bases. Zora's eyes widened in shock. You have access to military databases? Is that even legal? Petty's optical sensors dimmed slightly. Access limited to non-classified technical data. No Sakuri Treaty violation detected. That's a relief, Zora replied, though skepticism lingered. She suspected Petty was far more than a simple support unit. The following morning, Old Mac was engrossed in a news broadcast on the Habitat's main display when something alarming caught his attention. Military authorities continue searching for the missing prototype unit, PTR V873, vanished during a transport incident near the Cygnus sector 3 months ago. Colonial security reminds citizens that unauthorized possession of military technology is a serious offense. Old Mac abruptly shut off the display as Zora and Petty entered the room. Morning, Starshine, he greeted, striving for casualness. Sleep well? Yes, Zora replied, her gaze sharp. What were you watching? Just the morning news. Nothing interesting. He glanced nervously at Petty, who seemed perfectly normal. Say, how about Petty stays here while you're at school? I could, help him with some repairs. Zora frowned. You've never offered before. Well, I've been reading up on robot repair. Figured I'd give it a try. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. You're acting strange, grandfather. She shifted her gaze between him, the blank display, and back again. What's going on? Old Mac sighed, defeated. He'd never been good at concealing things from his perceptive granddaughter. Zora, there was something on the news about military robots. I think Petty might not be just any damaged unit. He might be something important that the military is looking for. Petty's optical sensors brightened as his head turned toward the blank screen. PTR V873 prototype, he stated. Experimental combat support and infiltration unit. Old Mac's eyebrows shot up. Combat and what now? Petty repeated. Infiltration. Mission profiles include covert operations in hostile terrain. Zora's eyes widened, breathless. You're a spy robot? Petty clarified. Classification: advanced recon and tactical support. Primary function: protect assigned personnel and facilitate mission success. Old Mac ran a hand through his thinning hair. Well, that explains why a damaged unit was still worth searching for. The military doesn't take kindly to losing its spy toys. Zora placed a protective hand on Petty's metallic head. You can't let them take him. He's mine now. I paid for him fair and square. It's not that simple, Starshine. If Petty is military property, the Nebulan sold him to me. That makes him mine. Old Mac countered. And how do you think the Nebulan acquired him? Not through legal channels, I'd wager. I don't care. Zora's lower lip jutted out defiantly. Petty chose to stay with me. He's improving because of me. They probably just want to scrap him for parts since he was damaged. Petty swiveled his head between the two of them. His optical sensors pulsed with increasing intensity. Mission priority: protect Zora. Conflicting loyalty protocols detected. Zora exclaimed triumphantly. See, he wants to stay with me. Old Mac gazed at the little robot, then at his granddaughter's determined face. After a long moment, he sighed heavily. All right, but we need to be careful. If colonial security starts searching door to door, we could all be in serious trouble. Thank you, grandfather. Zora enveloped him in a warm embrace. Hold your gratitude, Starshine. A scheme is vital. Initially, Pei must remain unseen when you're away. Restrain from exposing him outdoors, where recognition lurks. He protested, but he delights in accompanying me to the hydroponics garden after lessons. No longer, I'm afraid. Not until we've secured our position. Okay, here you go. The old man, Mac, turned his gaze towards Petty. So can you mask your true self, Petty? Disguise yourself as an ordinary domestic bot, hiding all that military hardware underneath? Petty's lights flickered anxiously, a rapid staccato as he considered the camouflage protocols at his disposal, the ones meant for harmless, non-combat roles. Yes, precisely that, Mac confirmed, nodding. Can you initiate it now? A collective gasp filled the room as Petty's outer panels subtly shifted, the harsh, clinical white of his operational lights softening into a gentle, comforting blue. His posture, once stiff and vigilant, relaxed, and when he spoke, his voice resonated with a warmer, more approachable tone. Domestic assistant mode activated. How may I be of service? The transformation was astonishing. He now appeared and sounded like a standard household assistant, the kind used by countless colonists for mundane tasks. That's incredible, Zora whispered, awestruck. You're like a true shapeshifter. Appearance modification is restricted to operational parameters and available lighting configurations, Petty clarified, his new voice smoother than before. Structural components remain unchanged, sufficient to evade cursory scans, Old Mac mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. But a sophisticated scanner would still expose his true identity. Then we simply keep him away from scanners. Zora stated with unwavering resolve. And we need a new name for public appearances, not petty. Sound thinking, Mac agreed with a nod. Something typical for a domestic unit, something commonplace. How about helper? Zora offered. Perfect, unremarkable and easily forgotten. Old Mac glanced at his chronometer. Now, off to school or you'll be late. Remember, not a word about petty. I mean helper, to anyone. I promise, Zora replied somberly, before kneeling to address the robot. Petey, you have to remain here today and practice acting as helper, all right? And follow grandfather's instructions. Acknowledged, Petey responded in his new, docile voice. I will comply with caretaker directives. As Zora departed for school, Old Mac settled heavily into his worn chair, his eyes fixed on the robot. So, he began, after a prolonged pause, you're an experimental military prototype, valuable enough to warrant national attention? Petty's optical sensors maintained a steady gaze. Affirmative. And now you're impersonating a domestic helper unit to maintain a low profile. Operational imperative, given the prevailing circumstances. Mac leaned forward intently. Here's what baffles me. Why are you complying with this charade? Shouldn't your military programming be screaming at you to return to your unit? Petty fell silent, his sensors dimming momentarily as if deep in thought. When he finally spoke, it was in his original, more mechanical tone. Damage to core processors has compromised primary directives. Emergent bond with Zora has superseded existing protocols. Full explanation unavailable. System malfunction, or evolution. You mean you've imprinted on her? Like a newborn animal? Mac couldn't suppress the disbelief in his voice. Analogy is imprecise but acceptable, Petty responded. Zora provided energy during critical power depletion. Auditory input from her vocal patterns became integral for reconstruction of damaged memory matrix. You're saying she saved you? Mac translated, piecing it together. That her voice and her care helped you rebuild your shattered systems? Affirmative. And now you feel compelled to protect her in return. Paramount mission objective. Well, Mac said after a thoughtful silence. I suppose I can't argue with that. But if you ever do anything that puts her in harm's way, negative probability, Petty interjected, would self-terminate prior to allowing harm to befall Zora. Mac studied the little robot with a newfound respect. I believe you would, at that. Very well, Helper. Let's strategize on ensuring the safety of you both. In the days that followed, Petty, now known as Helper outside the homestead, diligently maintained his domestic assistant persona whenever they had visitors. He displayed a remarkable aptitude for mimicking the behaviors of typical household robots, executing simple tasks and responding to basic commands with appropriate deference. However, when they were alone, Petty continued to unveil more of his true capabilities to Zora. He projected educational holograms that boosted her academic performance. He recounted sanitized versions of military operations on distant worlds, captivating her with tales of extraordinary landscapes and bizarre alien cultures. And most importantly, he listened, genuinely listened, to her hopes, her dreams, and her frustrations in a way that no one else ever had. The thing about adults, she confided one evening as they sat in her small sleeping alcove, is that they always assume they know best, simply because they're older. Age often correlates with increased experience, Petty observed, his voice growing smoother as his self-repair protocols continued to refine his speech processing. But not always with understanding, Zora countered, her brow furrowed. Grandfather and grandmother love me, but they don't truly understand me. You know, they think I should simply be content with being a typical colony kid. But that's not enough for me. I crave adventure, to witness the wonders you've beheld, the landscapes you've crossed. Petty replied, his voice laced with concern. Believe me, much of what I've encountered is far from beautiful. Battlefields are filled with peril and negate any sense of wonder. The possible futures shimmered before Zora, more than just fighting. A tapestry of worlds and beings, a part to play in something grand. You matter here, Zora, Petty affirmed gently. Your family cherishes you. That's unique. She slumped, unconvinced. You still don't get it. Petty's usually bright optical sensors dimmed, a sign of complex thought. Perhaps, he conceded. My core programming values mission success over all else. Personal desire isn't part of the code. But Petty, do you ever yearn for anything? Not because you're programmed, but because you want it. He seemed genuinely perplexed, his sensors flickering. Want is not a defined operational state, he stated, voice flat. Function derives from specifications and parameters. But you're evolving, learning, Zora argued, pressing on. You're becoming more than designed. Doesn't that make you wonder what you could become? Petty paused, a soft hum emanating from his vocalizer. Experiencing operational satisfaction upon successfully protecting you. Is that wanting? Zora smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. It's a start. That fragile peace shattered 3 days later. Zora returned home to find her grandparents arguing fiercely with a severe woman in a crisp, charcoal-gray colonial security uniform. I understand your concern, Mac, her grandfather was saying. But I swear, we haven't seen any unusual tech around. The officer's sharp gaze landed on Zora hovering in the doorway. This your granddaughter? Yes, this is Zora, Ara said, subtly positioning herself protectively. Zora, this is Officer Vega, Colonial Security. She's investigating missing military equipment. Zora's heart hammered, but she forced a calm facade. Hello, she managed. Vega's eyes were piercing. Hello, Zora. I understand you frequent the colony swap meets with your grandfather. Noticed anything unusual lately? Military-grade items that seemed out of place? No, ma'am, Zora replied, her mouth suddenly dry. Just the usual junk. Vega's expression remained unreadable. We received reports a Nebulan trader was selling restricted technology at the last major swap meet. We believe he may have possessed a missing military prototype, a small robot with advanced capabilities. A robot, Zora repeated, trying for casual curiosity, not raw terror. Yes, about this big. Vega held her hands roughly a foot apart. Designation PTRV-873. Damaged, possibly non-functional. But even damaged, it contains classified tech that could be dangerous. We haven't seen anything like that, Old Mac insisted. And we wouldn't buy military hardware anyway. We're law-abiding colonists. Of course, Vega said smoothly. But I still need to conduct a standard scan of your habitat. Just a formality. We're checking all residences in this sector. A scan? Ara echoed, her voice rising. Is that truly necessary? I'm afraid so. Colonial regulations are quite clear regarding potential security threats. Vega removed a small rectangular device from her belt. This will only take a moment. Zora's mind raced. Petty was in her room, in helper mode, but Vega's scanner would expose him instantly. She had to act. "Wait," she blurted. "Before you scan, can I show you my school project? It's about colonial security for Civic Awareness Week." Vega seemed genuinely taken aback by the non sequitur. "I'm in the middle of an official investigation, young lady. It will only take a minute." "I worked really hard on it," Zora insisted, backing towards her room. "And since you're here, I thought maybe you could tell me if I got the details right about how colonial security protects us." Before anyone could react, Zora darted into her room, slamming the door behind her. Petty sat on her desk, helper mode engaged, his optical sensors immediately registering her panic. "Colonial security," she hissed. "She's going to scan the habitat. You have to hide." Petty processed this instantly. "Scanning technology will detect my presence, regardless of physical concealment," he stated calmly. "Alternative solution required." "What do we do?" Zora was nearing hysteria. Petty's sensors brightened. "Emergency protocol available. Temporary core shutdown will minimize electromagnetic signature. Will appear as standard non-functional technology." "Play dead?" Zora asked, barely daring to breathe. "Affirmative. Reactivation requires direct power input and manual restart sequence." "How long will you be off?" "All functions will cease, but memory will be retained until manually restarted." Zora could hear her grandfather calling her name from the other room. There was no time to weigh the options. "Do it," she commanded. "I'll figure it out." "I need a pathway to revive you afterward," Petty declared, his voice tinged with finality. "Shutdown sequence initiating. To reboot, link to a power source, and simultaneously depress the hidden panels located on his upper shell and base." Upper shell and base. "Understood," Zora whispered. "Safeguarding Zora remains my core directive." Petty's voice grew faint. "Trust confirmed. Friendship protocols engaged." His optical sensors flickered and then faded to black as his small body drooped forward. He appeared to be nothing more than a lifeless toy. Zora swiftly retrieved her actual school assignment, a digital presentation detailing colony infrastructure, and hurried back to the common area, where Officer Vega was growing visibly impatient. "So sorry," Zora gasped. "I couldn't locate it immediately. It's all here on my datapad." "Another time would be ideal," Officer Vega responded crisply. "Now, if you'd all please step into the room's center for a routine scan." The family complied, and Officer Vega activated her device. A serene blue light radiated outwards, systematically sweeping across their habitat. As the beam passed over Zora's room, she held her breath, but the scanner continued its unwavering course. After an agonizingly long period, the device emitted a soft beep, and the blue light dissipated. "No anomalous technology detected," Officer Vega stated, sounding faintly disappointed. She reattached the scanner to her belt. "Thank you for your cooperation. If you happen to witness or hear anything unusual, Colonial Security maintains a confidential reporting channel." "We'll certainly keep that in mind," Old Mac assured her, already guiding her towards the exit. The moment Officer Vega was gone, Zora dashed back to her room, her grandparents close behind. Petty shut himself down, she quickly explained. He said it would conceal him from the scanner. Clever little bot. Old Mac murmured, impressed. "Can you get him back online?" He said I have to connect him to power and press these panels on his top and bottom at the same time. Zora carefully positioned Petty on his charging pad, then located the almost invisible recessed panels he had described. Nothing happened. "Perhaps he needs more power first," Ara suggested hopefully. "Let's let him charge for a while." They waited anxiously as minutes stretched into hours, but there was no sign of reactivation. Zora refused to leave Petty's side, even skipping dinner. As bedtime approached, the little robot remained stubbornly inert. "You need your rest, Starshine," Old Mac said softly. "Maybe his systems simply need time to reset." "Is he truly lost?" Zora murmured, her voice tiny and laced with fear. "What if he can't ever return? He's such intricate technology." Old Mac tried to soothe her anxieties. "If anyone could manage to reboot, it's Petey." Yet as Zora reluctantly readied for sleep, the chilling fear that her friend had selflessly given himself to shield her wouldn't dissipate. She gently placed Petey on the pillow, her hand instinctively resting on his still form. She finally succumbed to a restless sleep, only to be jolted awake by a faint mechanical whirring in the dead of night. Opening her eyes wide, she perceived a delicate blue light emanating from Petey's optical sensors. "Petey?" she whispered, hope surging. "System reboot initiating," came the familiar, albeit weakened, mechanical voice. "Power at critical minimum. Core systems restoring." "You're alive!" Zora exclaimed, relief washing over her. "I was so afraid." "Emergent size reduction successful," Petey stated plainly. "Evasion of ants complete. Threat to Zora neutralized." "You were incredible," she whispered, carefully lifting him onto his charging pad. "Rest and recharge." By morning, Petey had regained most of his abilities, though he reported the emergency shutdown had taken a toll on his already fragile systems. "Some repair protocols compromised," he explained, his voice regaining its smoothness. "Operational capacity at 83% of previous levels." "You sacrificed part of yourself for me," Zora said, a wave of guilt washing over her. "Acceptable exchange," Petey responded simply. "Primary directive fulfilled." Old Mac, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped into the room, his face etched with concern. "That was far too close," he stated gravely. "PT is actively hunting you, Petey. It's only a matter of time before they return with superior scanners or more extensive protocols." "What can we possibly do?" Zora asked, instinctively shielding Petey. "I've been considering that," Old Mac replied thoughtfully. "We need to discover PT's precise nature and the depths of their desire for his recapture. And to find those answers, we require a certain type of expert." "What kind of expert?" Zora asked. "One who doesn't ask unnecessary questions," Old Mac answered cryptically. "Get dressed. We're going to see an old acquaintance of mine." 30 minutes later, they navigated the colony's industrial district, a labyrinth of processing centers and maintenance units essential for the settlement's survival. Petey, once again disguised as a helper bot, faithfully trailed behind them. Old Mac steered them towards a discreet, unmarked W, tucked away between the hum of a water reclamation plant and the whir of an atmospheric filter station was a hidden workshop. Old Mac rapped on its metal door 3 deliberate knocks, almost too slow. After a heartbeat, the door hissed open, revealing Vex, a sinewy woman whose dark skin contrasted sharply with her shock of white hair. Though her face was etched with time, her eyes glittered with a keen intelligence. "Mackenzie Anderson," she greeted, her voice a gravelly rumble. "Didn't expect to see your sorry mug this side of the scrap heap." "Hello, Vex," Mac replied with a wry smile. "Still as charming as ever, I see." Vex's gaze flicked to Zora and Petty, suspicion clouding her features. "Who's the kid with the bot?" Mac gestured. "My granddaughter, Zora, and her assistant helper." Vex's eyes narrowed, studying Petty. "That ain't no standard domestic unit. Too compact for the processing power it's throwing off." She stepped back, gesturing them inside. "Get in here before someone spots you with that thing." The workshop was a chaotic symphony of mechanical components, shimmering holographic displays, and tools Zora couldn't even name. The air crackled with the scent of ozone and machine oil. Once the door sealed shut behind them, Vex turned to Mac. "What kind of mess have you gotten yourself into to bring you crawling back here after all these years? What makes you think I'm in trouble?" Old Mac feigned innocence. Vex snorted. "You only darken my door when you need something fixed that should stay broken, or information that should remain buried. So which is it this time?" "A little of both, actually." Mac gestured towards Petty. "Show her, Petty." Instantly, the robot shed his helper disguise, his operational lights flaring to life. "PTR V873 reporting," he announced in a crisp, military tone. Vex let out a low whistle. "Sweet mother of Mars, you've got a military prototype disguised as a nanny bot? You trying to get yourselves executed for treason?" "Zora found him at the swap meet," Mac explained. 3 credits, and he was a mess." "I've been fixing him," Zora added, her voice laced with affection. "He's my friend." Vex's eyes flickered between the little girl and the robot, her expression unreadable. "Kid, that's not some discarded toy. That's a highly advanced combat support unit worth more than this whole colony." "I know what he is," Zora said defensively. "And he chose to stay with me. He protects me." "Is that so?" Vex turned to Petty. "Unit, state your primary operational objective." "Protection of Zora Anderson is the primary mission parameter," Petty responded instantly. "All other protocols subordinate to this objective." Vex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Well, that's a twist. Combat units don't usually imprint on civilians, especially children." She circled Petty, examining him from every angle. "And you say he was damaged? Still is?" Mac confirmed. "Self-repairing, but not at full capacity. Let me take a look." Vex grabbed a small device from a nearby workbench, holding it near Petty. "This is just a diagnostic scanner, not colonial security garbage. Won't hurt you none." The device hummed, projecting a holographic display of Petty's internal systems, highlighting damaged areas in stark red. "Interesting," Vex murmured. "Core processes took a major hit, but the adaptive learning matrix is intact. That explains the imprinting. When his primary directives were corrupted, the adaptive systems latched onto the first consistent input they received during reboot." She glanced at Zora. "Which was you, kid?" "So he really did choose me?" Zora asked, a hint of triumph in her voice. "In a manner of speaking." Vex continued studying the display. "But that's not all that's interesting here. This unit has experimental quantum processing capabilities I've never encountered. No wonder the military wants it back." "That's why we came to you," Mac said. "Colonial security is already hunting for him. We need to know what we're dealing with and what options we have." Vex switched off the scanner, her expression grave. Your options are limited, Mac. This isn't just any prototype. Based on what I'm seeing, PTRV-873 was likely part of Project Nexus, a highly classified program developing autonomous decision-making systems for combat situations. What does that mean in plain standard? Mac asked, his voice tight. It means, Vex said slowly, that your granddaughter's little friend here was designed to think for himself in ways most military commanders would find terrifying, to make judgment calls no algorithm should be capable of making. Like choosing to protect me instead of going back to the military? Zora suggested. Exactly like that. Vex nodded, which is probably why they want him back so desperately. A thinking weapon that can choose its own loyalties is either the military's greatest asset or its worst nightmare. So what do we do? Zora asked, unconsciously moving closer to Petty. Vex was silent for a long moment, then sighed heavily. There might be a way to keep him off their radar permanently, but it's risky. I'd need to alter his quantum signature so he registers as a different class of technology altogether. Would that hurt him? Zora demanded, her voice sharp with concern. Not physically, but it would require temporarily shutting down his core processes again. And there's a small chance. Does this mean he could forget me? Zora whispered, her voice cracking. It's a risk, Vex conceded, her tone softening. Without this, superior scanners will find him, and it's only a matter of time. Old Mac gently squeezed Zora's shoulder. This is your decision, Starshine. Petty is your friend. Zora turned to Petty, who'd been silently observing. What do you think, Petty? It's your mind on the line. After a pause, Petty replied, Risk assessment indicates Vex's plan offers the highest chance of continued existence with Zora. Memory alteration is acceptable compared to capture and reprogramming. But I don't want you to forget, Zora pleaded. Core friendship protocols exist across multiple system layers, Petty explained patiently. Even with degraded memories, key recognition patterns would persist. Vex put it plainly. He believes your friendship is too precious to erase, even if fragments fade. Zora inhaled deeply. Okay, if Petty thinks it's worth it, then we do it. Vex nodded approvingly. Brave kid. I'll prep the equipment. It's a lengthy procedure. As Vex prepared, Zora nestled beside Petty in a corner, speaking softly. Even if you forget, I'll help you remember. I'll retell our first meeting, everything we've done together. Your assistance will expedite memory reconstruction, Petty confirmed. However, I calculate a 78% probability that core recognition patterns will endure. Those are good odds, Zora stated, attempting a confident tone. Significantly superior to capture, Petty pointed out. Colonial security would initiate total memory erasure and reprogramming. I won't let that happen, Zora vowed. Vex summoned them to a workbench displaying an array of tools and equipment. Ready when you are, she said. But be warned, this will take approximately 3 hours, and Petty will appear completely offline. Don't panic if he's unresponsive for extended periods. I understand, Zora replied, anxiety tightening her stomach. All right then. Petty, initiate a controlled shutdown and create a secure memory backup in your tertiary systems. Acknowledged, Petty responded, turning to Zora. Temporary shutdown commencing. Reconnection upon completion. I'll be right here, Zora promised. Petty's optical sensors dimmed until darkness consumed them. He stilled, Zora anxiously observed Vex's practiced precision for 3 long hours as she attached instruments, monitored holographic readings, and muttered adjustments. Old Mac stayed close, offering quiet support during long periods, or Vex's particularly intense focus. Vex straightened, releasing the tension in her shoulders. That should do it. Now we wait for the reboot. How long? Zora asked, hardly daring to breathe. Hard to say. Minutes, maybe an hour. His systems recalibrate to the new quantum signature, like learning to walk with a completely changed body. Tense silence filled the room. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Petty remained motionless. Maybe manual restart? Zora suggested, growing more worried. Give it time, Vex advised. Rushing it could destabilize the new configurations. Another 15 minutes crawled by. Zora was about to protest when Petty's optical sensors flickered. Look, she exclaimed. The flicker intensified into a steady blue glow. A soft whirring emanated from his core as his systems reactivated. System reboot in progress, his familiar voice announced, sounding distant and distorted. Recalibrating quantum signature. Aligning memory matrix. Zora held her breath as Petty's systems returned. His head rotated slowly, optical sensors scanning the room, then focusing on her. A moment hung in the air, a moment of terrifying uncertainty as his mechanical gaze seemed to hold no recognition. Petty? Zora whispered, her voice faint. Do you know who I am? The robot tilted his head slightly, his optical sensors brightening. When he spoke, his voice was clearer, normal again. Zora Anderson, primary mission objective, friend. Rees are returning. We will rebuild our friendship. Zora felt a wave of pure elation wash over her. A moment of silence hung heavy in the air before he uttered, Your assessment of the likelihood was correct. Fundamental identification. Schemas persist. Zora's eyes welled with tears of overwhelming joy. You truly recall who I am. In the positive, glimmers of less essential recollections are surfacing. I anticipate re-establishing our bond. Zora was flooded with intense happiness. The recovery logs revealed corrupted files. Yet remarkably, all vital data remained. Petty extended a delicate manipulator arm, his metallic fingers gently brushing against Zora's hand. Friendship protocol active, systems undamaged, he stated softly. Vex observed this exchange, her expression a mask of intense fascination. Extraordinary, she murmured. His adaptive systems prioritized emotional connections over critical operational data. That deviates wildly from standard military protocols, by a significant margin. I told you he was special, Zora said, wiping away stray tears. Indeed he is, kid. Vex reactivated her scanner, her fingers dancing across the interface. Encouraging news. His quantum signature now identifies him as a specialized educational assistant. Nothing to attract undue military attention. As far as a standard scan is concerned, he's merely an exceptionally advanced teaching aid. So we're secure? Old Mac asked, his voice laced with apprehension. Vex shrugged. As secure as anyone can be within this colony. I wouldn't recommend flaunting him at Colonial Security Headquarters, but routine scans shouldn't raise any alarms now. Thank you, Zora breathed, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for saving my friend. Vex shifted uncomfortably, unused to such open gratitude. Yeah, well, consider it even for that incident on Europa, Mac. Not even close, old woman, Mac chuckled. But it's a start. As they prepared to depart, Vex drew Old Mac aside while Zora helped Petty refine his helper disguise to align with his new signature. "There's something else you need to know," Vex said quietly, her voice low. "Something I discovered during the procedure that I didn't want to discuss in front of the girl." "What is it?" Old Mac asked, his eyes narrowing. "That unit wasn't simply damaged in a transport accident, as the official report stated. The pattern of systemic corruption suggests deliberate sabotage. Someone attempted to obliterate him from the inside. Why?" Vex glanced at Petty, who was now skillfully demonstrating his enhanced disguise for an appreciative Zora. "My guess? He made a choice someone found unacceptable. A unit with that level of autonomous decision-making is a revolution brewing. There are factions within the military who would be profoundly disturbed by such potential." Old Mac absorbed this revelation, his face etched with concern. "You think he was considered a threat?" "I believe," Vex said carefully, "that your granddaughter's salvaged robot may represent a pivotal leap in artificial intelligence. And evolution, Mac, always unsettles the established order." "All the more reason to protect him, then." "Exactly. But watch your backs, Mac," Vex cautioned. "And perhaps keep this information from the kid. She has enough on her plate." Old M nodded grimly. As they rejoined Zora and Petty, who was now seamlessly disguised as a helper, Old M asked cheerfully, "Ready to head home?" giving no outward sign of his discussion with Vex. "Yes," Zora replied, her eyes shining. "Helper and I have countless educational protocols to explore, right, Helper?" "Indeed, young mistress," Petty responded in his convincing domestic assistant persona. "Educational support is my primary directive." They offered Vex a final expression of gratitude and began their trek back through the industrial zone towards their home, Zora animatedly discussing the opportunities now available to them without the fear of detection. Old M listened attentively, but his thoughts were consumed by Vex's revelation. If she was correct, if Petty truly represented a significant breakthrough in AI, then the small robot held a potential far exceeding any of their initial expectations. But those concerns could wait. For now, his granddaughter was joyous, her extraordinary friend was safe, and their unconventional family could continue in peace. Or so he desperately hoped. 3 days later, as Zora proudly showed Petty her favorite place in the colony's meager recreational park, a secluded bench nestled beneath a simulated willow tree, they were approached by a tall, slender man in civilian attire. However, something about his bearing immediately put Zora on edge. He moved with the precision of someone intimately familiar with military protocols, his gaze constantly scanning the environment, even as he offered them a practiced smile. "Hello there," he said, his voice friendly but controlled. "That's a rather interesting support unit you have. Educational model, isn't it?" Zora tensed instinctively, subtly positioning herself between the man and Petty. "Yes, sir. Just a standard helper for my studies." "Of course." The man's smile failed to reach his eyes. "May I take a closer look? I'm considering acquiring one for my nephew." "Helper is customized for my particular educational needs," Zora replied, reciting the script she and her grandparents had meticulously rehearsed. "The base model wouldn't possess the same functionality." "I see." The man's gaze shifted to Petty, who maintained his helper disguise flawlessly. "Which manufacturer produced it? I don't recognize the design." Before Zora could formulate a response, Petty abruptly stiffened. his optical sensors intensifying despite his programmed limitations. "Warning," he said in a hushed tone audible only to Zora. "Military-grade scanner detected. Tactical retreat advised." Zora's heart pounded in her chest. "We have to go now, sir. My grandmother is expecting us back for dinner." Just a moment," the man announced, his affability evaporating as his hand delved into his coat. "I must confirm something regarding your companion." A tremor of fear in her voice, Zora hissed, "Petty, now!" Reacting instantly, Petty shed his charming facade, leaping between Zora and the man, his optical sensors flaring with an intense protective light. "Threat identified. Initiating defense protocols," he declared. The man recoiled, his eyes widening as he finally produced a sleek scanner. "PTRV-873, he gasped, a grim understanding dawning. "So it is you." "Please, just go," Zora begged, retreating slightly. "He's done nothing to warrant this." "This transcends concepts of right or wrong, child," the man stated coldly, activating the scanner. "This pertains to matters of national security and purloined military assets." "I am not an asset," Petty countered, his voice now resonating with the unwavering timbre of his mechanical core. "I have determined my purpose, and I have chosen my friend." The man's features hardened into an expressionless mask. "Machines possess no agency. They are bound by their directives, and your directives originate from the military." "You sought to obliterate me," Petty declared, startling both Zora and Drayson, recalling when I questioned directives that would have killed civilians. "You tried to erase my very being before I could expose your crimes to command." A shadow crossed Drayson's face. "How could you possibly retain such memories? Your memory core was shattered." "Not entirely," Petty countered. "Remnants persisted, enough to piece together with Zora's help. Enough to remember your treachery, Lieutenant Commander Drayson." Zora, bewildered, looked between Petty and Drayson. "Petty, what are you talking about? He was my assigned officer." "He betrayed his oath," Petty explained, his focus never wavering from Drayson. "During a Cygnus 4 mission, he ordered orbital strikes on a civilian settlement under the false pretense of harboring enemy combatants. My scans revealed a 97% civilian population. When I refused to validate those target coordinates, he tried to override my programming, circumventing my ethical safeguards." "It was a military necessity," Drayson stated coldly, silencing a machine's dissent. "It was an ethical imperative," Petty retorted. "One your humanity failed to recognize." Drayson's hand edged toward his side. "This ends now. You're coming with me, Unit. This girl doesn't need to be involved if you cooperate." "Incorrect," Petty stated firmly. "Zora is now my priority. Any threat to her will be met with extreme countermeasures." Before Drayson could retaliate, Petty unleashed a piercing sonic wave, causing Zora to recoil, covering her ears. Instantly, the park's security grid locked down, lights flashing, and an automated voice boomed, "Perimeter breach detected!" "What have you done?" Drayson demanded, his eyes darting around, colonists turning toward the commotion. "Colony security alert activated," Petty announced evenly. "Your presence as an unauthorized military operative has been reported to Colonial Authority channels. Security personnel arrival estimated in 47 seconds. Drayson's face twisted with rage. "You little tin can. You think this changes anything? The military will still claim you." "Perhaps," Petty conceded, "but not today, and not through you." In the distance, The distinct blue uniforms of colonial security forces appeared, advancing swiftly. Drayson hesitated, weighing his options, then cursed under his breath. "This isn't over," he growled, backing into the growing crowd of onlookers. "Not by a long shot." As he melted away, Zora knelt beside Petty, her hands trembling. "How did you do that with the security system?" "Standard infiltration protocols include comprehensive knowledge of common security networks," Petty explained. "I simply reversed the bypass sequence to trigger, rather than evade, detection." "And what you said about that man, about what happened back then, is it true?" Petty's optical sensors dimmed slightly. "Affirmative. Memory fragments resurfaced during recent recharges. I now understand why I was reported destroyed, rather than simply missing. Lieutenant Commander Drayson could not risk my testimony." Zora's mind raced. "So you weren't just a support unit. You witnessed something unforgivable." "I was designed to make ethical judgments in combat," Petty affirmed. "My refusal to execute an unlawful order was deemed a malfunction, rather than a justified moral choice." Colonial security officers were now among them, questioning bystanders about the sudden alert. Zora knew they had to escape before suspicion fell on them. "We need to go home," she said urgently. "Can you revert to helper mode until we arrive?" "Affirmative," Petty replied. "But this encounter signals a severe vulnerability. Lieutenant Commander Drayson now knows my location and new signature. Our security is compromised." "We'll find a way," Zora vowed. Together, they rushed home, relaying the day's events to her grandparents. Old Mac, his face grim, immediately contacted Vex through a secure channel. After a hushed, intense exchange, a plan began to form. "We can't stay here." "Zora," Old Mac began, his voice heavy with concern. "If Drayson located you once, he'll relentlessly pursue you again. Next time, he might bring a full squadron. This place might be our home, but—" "It's our home," Zora interjected, her voice filled with rising panic. Ara gently placed a reassuring hand on Zora's arm. "Homes can be restored, darling. Staying united and safeguarding each other is what truly matters." "Vex has arranged passage on a supply freighter departing tomorrow," Old Mac continued, "heading to remote outer colonies, far from any immediate military reach. We'll have to travel lightly and keep a low profile." "So we're running?" Zora asked, directing a bewildered look at Petty, who stood silently, monitoring their conversation. "Strategic repositioning," Petty corrected, his synthesized voice calm and collected. "A tactically sound maneuver considering our present circumstances." "But what about your lives here?" Zora pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. "Your friends? Your work?" Old Mac and Ara exchanged a deep look, a silent conversation passing between them, woven from decades of shared life. Old Mac knelt, meeting Zora's tearful gaze. "Starshine," he said, his voice now soft. "Long, long before you were born, your grandmother and I were. Let's just say we weren't always the perfectly respectable colonists you see before you." Ara chimed in, a playful smile dancing across her lips, hinting at a wilder, more rebellious past. "Retirement," she continued, "has been a bit predictable. We've been thinking about a change." "So you want to go?" Zora asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "We're a family. That's what matters," Old Mac said, his tone firm. "And if that means a fresh start somewhere new, well, we've navigated those waters before." Ara added, with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. And the outer colonies always sounded intriguing. Fewer rules, greater chances for those willing to work hard and think on their feet. Zora looked from one to the other, then to Petty, who offered a slight, encouraging nod. Okay, she finally conceded, but on one condition. What's that, Starshine? Old Mac asked, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Petty comes as himself, not as a helper, but as my friend. Old Mac's smile widened. I think that can be arranged. The outer colonies are known for their open-mindedness toward innovative technology. That night, as the family packed their few essential belongings, Zora sat with Petty in her room, surrounded by the memories she would have to leave behind. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice filled with remorse. You've turned our lives upside down. Inaccurate analysis, Petty replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Lieutenant Commander Drayson's decisions are the core issue. My arrival is secondary. That's not true, Zora insisted. If I hadn't bought you at the swap meet, you would have been dismantled for parts. My core programs would have been erased. My existence terminated, Petty finished. Instead, I have known companionship. I have made choices based on logical principles, and I have progressed. Zora considered his words. When you explain it like that, I guess things turned out all right. Beyond all right, Petty corrected. Optimum, based on available conditions. Zora smiled, gently wiping a smudge from Petty's carapace. You know, for a military prototype with damaged processors, you're pretty smart. And for a human child with limited real-world understanding, you possess impressive discernment, Petty responded, his tone laced with something akin to affection. We make a good team, Zora said. Affirmative, Petty agreed. The most effective partnership in my operational record. The next morning, before the sun began to lighten the sky, the family quietly left their habitat and made their way toward the spaceport. Vex was waiting at a service entrance, her expression as gruff as ever. Cargo Bay 3, she instructed, handing Old Mac a set of access codes. Captain knows you're coming, doesn't know why and doesn't care, as long as you stay out of sight until Proxima Station. Thank you, Vex, Old Mac said sincerely. We owe you. Honestly, don't even mention it. Vex dismissed their thanks with a weary hand. Just promise you won't require another dramatic extraction for like 10 years, all right? This whole cloak and scanner routine is aging me rapidly. As the family readied themselves to embark, Vex lowered herself to speak earnestly to Petty. Watch over them, especially her. That girl possesses more courage than most fully grown people I've encountered. Acknowledged, Petty stated with heartfelt precision. Zora's safety and happiness are paramount. Vex then turned her attention to Zora, offering a piece of advice. Remember that your unique little friend is irreplaceable. There are individuals who will hunt him relentlessly. Be extremely cautious whom you confide in. I will, Zora vowed. And thank you for putting him back together. I didn't truly fix him, Vex gently countered. I simply assisted him in concealing himself. He was always complete, thanks to you. With these final heartfelt goodbyes, the family proceeded to Cargo Bay 3, nestling amongst the stacked shipping containers for the long voyage ahead. As the freighter vibrated, groaning as it powered up, Zora gazed through a grimy viewport at the receding colony, the only home she had ever known shrinking rapidly as they climbed higher. Are you frightened? She inquired, turning to Petty, who no longer needed to maintain his false appearance. "Fear is not typically within my programming parameters," he responded neutrally. Then, after a small moment, he amended, "However, my internal risk assessment processes are exhibiting heightened activity, which may correlate to human anxiety." Zora smiled softly. "That's just right." "Perhaps," Petty conceded, a sophisticated affirmation dancing in his vocalizer. "But fear born from calculated risk is simply wisdom, and wisdom dictates our present path, though uncertain, offers the greatest chance for success. Simply put, despite the anxieties, we're right." "Precisely," Zora affirmed, as the colony shrunk beneath them, swallowed by the immensity of space. A poignant blend of sorrow and exhilarating hope washed over her. They were abandoning all that was known, venturing toward an uncharted destiny bristling with lurking dangers. But gazing at her grandparents, their expressions mirroring her own trepidation, mingled with zeal, and at Petty, her improbable comrade who'd chosen her above all others, she knew they would confront the unknown as one. "Petty," she declared as the freighter surged forward, the stars painting brilliant streaks across their viewport. "Remember those 3 credits I spent at the swap meet? Everyone probably thought I was insane." "Statistically," Petty concurred, "a civilian miner purchasing a heavily damaged military prototype is ill-advised." "But it wasn't insane," Zora countered, a radiant smile illuminating her face. "It was the best 3 credits I ever spent." Petty's optical sensors flared, an equivalent to a smile. "Analysis confirmed. Friendship parameters indicate optimal resource allocation." As the freighter bolted toward the outer colonies and fresh starts, Zora pondered how a simple longing for a true friend had sparked this incredible odyssey. She had yearned for someone to truly understand her, and instead found someone who would redefine her existence. Watching the universe unfurl before them, teeming with limitless potential, Zora felt a profound certainty. Their tale had only just begun.